Everybody happy?
I'm rolling.
Rolling, you're rolling?
Speed.
Okay, just 1 second. And speed.
Rabbi, we're sitting here in a synagogue in Boulder. You've spent much of your life in places like this. You grew up as an Orthodox Jew. You were ordained as an Orthodox rabbi. But you had a lot of questions about Orthodox Judaism. What were your doubts and your questions?
Well, they first came slowly, you know. When I was in school, one of the questions would come up about the creation taking place in 6 days of 24 hours. That somehow, you know, but in connection with everything that came in about evolution and fossils and so on and so forth, didn't sit so well with me.
Did you just not believe it?
No, because I was puzzled, and then I had to try and spin an answer. So I remember at one point, it must have been about 12, that I spun an answer that what happened was that before the flood of Noah, all those animals were around, and dinosaurs and so on and so forth. And then came the flood, and they were all buried. And from this we are getting the petroleum, and I had it all figured out that way. For a while, that worked.
But you had other doubts. Yeah. Yeah.
Good here. Speed.
And speed.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more about those doubts a bit later in the interview. Your family also fled Europe during the Holocaust. How did that experience affect you?
It was very upsetting because when I saw myself, I wanted to become a chemist in Vienna. And yes, I have studied at a yeshiva, at a gymnasium, some Hebrew and this and that. But my hope at that time was to be able to put things together and to take them apart and to help people live better. I mean, I was excited by chemistry, partly because I had a teacher that I had a crush on, and he really was inspiring in this field. But then when we had to flee across the border into Belgium, to Antwerp, the feeling was very, very strong that why have we been so forsaken? Why is it that people give us so much trouble? Why is it that no country would want to give us visa to let us enter? There was just in Evian in Switzerland a conference to open doors for refugees, and none of the countries offered anything. And we knew that if we were caught with Hitler, we wouldn't be able to survive. So that raised question, what kind of a God is permitting these things, and so on and so forth. And that rankled a lot. At the same time, I was also trying to obey the religious laws. So it is doing it and also feeling at the same time that there is some friction between where my heart is and where my mind is. So I was very lucky to meet some people who were able to help me.
Tell me about that friction. What do you mean about friction?
Some things I like to do that are natural, that are instinctive. And then there are some things that religion will say, don't. You mustn't do this, or you mustn't do this at this time. For instance, Passover comes and bread is out for a week. So the question is, why? Why? And yes, we have a whole tradition that gives us good reasons, but the feeling isn't necessarily in the place that these reasons should make a difference to me in my life, especially when I'm a teenager and I want to debunk everything.
During the 60s, you hung around with a lot of writers and thinkers who were questioning a lot of things. How did they influence you as a religious person?
Well, you know, it's not a person influencing as it is the vibration of the society in which I move, you know, that sort of says that in this society we take such and such things for granted. These are the absolutes, if you will, for this society. And as it was happening, we had just come out from the McCarthy era and gotten into, I remember I was a Hillel director teaching, working with students at the University of Manitoba, and the time came for coffee, the coffee shops that were there, and kids were playing chess and were ordering this kind of coffee, and that way, way before Starbucks, that thing. Mm-hmm. And so most of my business with the students I did there.
And that was frowned upon?
No, that wasn't. In fact, my board and all the people were happy that I would spend the time with the students and find them where they could be found. So, but this also influenced. So you read Camus, you read Sartre, and at the same time, some things in science fiction that open up a vista of something different and more beautiful and more together in the future. So all these things were there. Then reading Aldous Huxley and finding out that the things that I found out, because we skipped the period in which Judaism became important to me, and Jewish mysticism and so on and so forth. So I read about these things and I had experiences about them, but then I read that there is a chemical way to verify those experiences of the spirit. And that was very interesting. So some of the people with whom I was hanging out at that time were into the same kind of thing. So there was a Dr. Humphrey Osmond and Abe Hoffer in Capel, Saskatchewan at that time. And I wrote to them asking whether I could have an experience in their place. And
What do you mean an experience?
Well, taking LSD at that time. That's very simple. That's the experience.
You wanted to take LSD?
Oh, sure. I had read how Aldous Huxley describes the states that mystics were in that he had because he had taken some mescaline. And he called the book The Doors of Perception. And that was a very exciting time. So it looked like we would be now able to explore areas of the mind that before only mystics and shamans were talking about, and we wouldn't have to fast and live in isolation for 40 days or for 3 years' time.
But you were an Orthodox rabbi at the time.
So it wasn't not kosher. LSD on Pesach would be a problem because it is lysergic acid. It's come from ergot, and ergot grows on rye, and that would be chometz. So if I had to go by the basic Sharia, by the basic Jewish law, there's nothing against that. For instance, tonight is going to be Purim, and so the commandment is to get so drunk that you don't know the difference between blessed be Mordechai and cursed be Haman. Now can you imagine if I would be able to say, blessed be Osama? Yeah? What kind of state of mind I would have to achieve at that time? Well, that was a very inviting thing to be able to transcend good and evil and look at the universe from that place.
You know, a lot of people weren't happy with you doing that. You've talked publicly about taking LSD. A lot of your colleagues were very critical. What happened as a result of that?
Well, I tell you something. They may have been critical, or whatever they did, but then very often they would come and say, what was it like, and where might I get some? So.
And did you tell them?
Of course I did. Of course I did, because my sense was, you see, imagine if I was the only one who had that experience, and nobody else had that experience. They used to call it psychotomimetic, mimicking craziness. So if I couldn't tell anyone in the world the place where I was and share and get a sense that this wasn't all crazy stuff in my head. And when I find this in books like R.M. Buck, R.M. Buck, Dr. Buck, who wrote about cosmic consciousness, Canadian too. Mm-hmm. So there you read about all those things, so you have a sense that they exist, these states exist. Now, finding out and experiencing these states was an important thing. So when I'm teaching Kabbalah, Hasidism, I'm teaching about places that are beyond the physical. So that's what you call it, metaphysical. And so you go into a place and You say that there are 4 worlds and there are 10 sephirot, and you can get closer to the divine heart and to the divine mind with that. So these were exciting things. So I didn't consider this to go against the grain of my religion.
But you did split from Orthodox Judaism around the same time. What happened?
Yeah, but that wasn't necessarily the issue of, well, let's begin with that thing, the place of women, okay? There is in Orthodox Judaism, you wouldn't count a woman as being one of the 10 to make up a quorum. My sense was that our religion had become very, how would I say, imbalanced, more testosterone, patriarchal stuff in it than it needs to have in order to be friendly to the planet. And ecology became very important to me. That's the reason why I coined the word eco-kosher. It's not enough if something is kosher. It has to be ecologically kosher too. So ecofeminism started to come in and said, therefore, I cannot abide by those rules that would say that a woman's mind is not to be considered as being part of a quorum with whom to worship. Now, I know that our religion began in a homosocial environment. That's to say, men were with men, women were with women, and you don't mix the two of them. And so therefore, in the synagogue, they would erect a barrier between men and women, and I can understand that. But now take a look. The same people who would sit on one side of the barrier would work in the office with people, you know, who
With
don't
women.
sit on the other side of the barrier and sometimes don't even have anything to cover the front of their desk, right? And so at the same time you take for granted, because that's not what you're after. You're after to be able to work together, to share in mind and to learn. This is so wonderful. You're a woman, I'm a man, and if I were to have to go and think like this, I'm not looking at you because you're a woman, and I'm embarrassed that we should talk about such things with each other, you know. So
the women, the place of women was something that you had a lot of
Right.
questions about. You also had questions about Jewish law and strict adherence to Jewish law. Can you explain for me?
Sure. Once you learn something about anthropology and the evolution of technology, I used to give a series of talks about technology and religion. When you start looking at the Jewish sacred technology, we have a prayer shawl made of wool, the fringes of wool. I have tefillin that are made of leather. The Torah is written on parchment, and on Rosh Hashanah I'm going to blow a ram's horn. What does it tell you about what kind of a technology I lived? I lived in a shepherd culture, right? So all these raw materials are my raw materials that I can use for serving God with. Now that's the kind of stuff that makes you think, and where are we today? And so then the question comes up about, and some people have been challenging me about that. Imagine that I had to make a living as a potter. And I'd have to toil a whole day and late into the night to make pots and pots and pots. And then came the Sabbath, and to make a pot on the Sabbath would be breaking the Sabbath. It's not something that I should be doing to produce more pots. Now at this point, I'm working at a brokerage. I'm sick and tired of numbers and of papers and of all these things, and now comes the day that I can really be myself. And I take out the potter's wheel, and I throw a pot, and I live completely in that thing. Am I breaking the Sabbath or not? According to
Are you saying that people should be allowed to throw pots on the Sabbath if they want?
See, as I'm saying it, the answer is no. I'm not saying this. I'm saying that the person who does it in this way as I described it, I can't say that that person broke the Sabbath. There's a difference between that. I'm not saying everybody don't go to synagogue and throw pots. But the same thing is with gardening and so on. So we would consider gardening to be breaking the Sabbath if I had to do this for a living. But it's not that I want to hire a gardener, let's say. I'm not speaking for myself, but I can speak for other people whom I feel would say that. I don't want to hire anyone to do it. I want to get my hands on that.
But you know, many Jews consider Jewish law to be the glue, the absolute glue of their faith.
So
They have a lot of problems with what you're saying.
Well, that's true, and I have a problem also with what other people do with it. If I were to say, what does the Sabbath tell me to do? It tells me move out of production into being, okay? And I know that a lot of production is happening on the Sabbath, from going to the synagogue and having classes and doing this and doing that. All of these are good, holy things. But when a person says, I worked the whole week, and now I want to be in God's presence without doing anything. So I have a sense that the inner, I don't want to say spirit, the inner essence of it, what it's all about, is more fulfilled by the person who can do that. So while I wouldn't say that people should go ahead and do gardening on Shabbos, I want them to come to the synagogue. And I want them to celebrate and to pray and to worship, to learn how to do that right so they don't spin their wheels. That's very important, because if I were to look at churches and synagogues today, I would see people coming and they don't know what to do, but they're doing it out of a certain obligation. And then what are you going away with? And I would like them to have something to go away with that. So that's important. But as you're raising the question about basic things, I wouldn't want to say that people should eat anything that isn't kosher. We keep our home very kosher. We don't answer the telephone on the Shabbos. I do a lot with my computers, but not on Shabbos. So there is that element in which
But
I
are you
observe.
picking and choosing the things that work for you within your life?
That's right.
But Jewish law is absolute, is it not?
Who says so? I have a feeling that if you study it, you see that way back there were two opinions. There was Hillel, there was Shammai, there were some people who were more strict, some people who were less strict, and there is a whole continuum in that. I know that when people come from a heteronomic point of view saying, I don't know what the rules are, someone else tells me and I trust what that person's going to say, and if he says no, I won't do it. And you know what? That's a very good way for people who are learning in the beginning where it is. And the more I learn about the sources and the more I know, that tells me how to discriminate. I don't want to give up serving God. And I don't believe that the revelation doesn't carry truth. So I buy the truth from the revelation and I want to serve God, but also from a point of view that is balanced today. And I think that's where Jewish renewal differs from orthodoxy.
Part of the renewal is your very openness about sexuality. You've told bar mitzvah students that masturbation is a spiritual experience. You know, this makes people very uncomfortable.
So you know what? If they were to only look what they put under the rug and don't want to look at, you know, I want to talk to any of those people who are getting upset by that and ask them the question, tell me, what happened to you sexually between the years of 13 and until you got married? And now tell me the truth. And most of the time they would also have to confess, I don't believe that they haven't masturbated and so on, but they haven't managed to do this in a way that would celebrate the gift that God gave them in the body. Now, if there is no outlet that is a kosher outlet, then the question is, what do you do with that energy? And here is when I was saying, I wasn't saying masturbate every day. I was saying to that person, if you can manage, control it during the week, and then Shabbos comes, and on the Sabbath, celebrate your body and take your time. I'm not ashamed of saying that. And if those people who...
But can you see how some people might have trouble with
No,
what you're saying?
it's their problem. It's their problem because the hypocrisy is so great. You know, I know that the more they will feel ouched by my statement, the deeper is the hypocrisy in which they try and bury their own attraction, repulsion to sexuality.
You've also been divorced several times. Your critics say that this is morally unacceptable for a spiritual leader. What do you say to those folks?
Well, I agree with them.
You
They
do?
they don't have to accept it. I only know that there is a place where the Torah is different than, let's say, in Christianity, where it says if two people can't get along. There's a rabbi who recently wrote a book that divorce is a mitzvah. That there are some situations where karma and life between two people is outgrown, and what is left is difficulty, great difficulty. They come back into their own sphere and they see that this is not who they should be and with whom they should be. And sometimes you take a look at how long you keep from divorce in order to protect children, to protect other situations, and so on and so forth. And sometimes those people who, again, complain should look at their own relationship and see how much they have cost them and how much they have died inside of them from being with a spouse that hasn't allowed them to live fully. So
no regrets.
Huh?
No regrets about that. No.
No, but I also feel good about my past spouses.
You've met the Dalai Lama, and you've also talked very openly about learning from other religions. Many Jews, Orthodox Jews, would not see any value in that. Why do you do this?
Well, let's go ahead and say that after the Holocaust we needed transplants. I'm very serious about that, because when you start looking at how many thousands of holy, great, learned people were killed at that time, and you start looking at a religion that had its underbelly cut out at that point, and so much of what we would practice in the spiritual crafts has been taken from us. Then we come and we try and rebuild our infrastructure in America. So there should be kosher, there should be this, there should be that. And about the spiritual stuff, that can't be written so much in books. It has to be given over by the great mentors. My mentor was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, and from him I got a great deal. And I had the sense that before that time I may have been connected to Judaism, but through him I was connected to God. And
What's the difference?
What's the difference? Oh, Judaism is a convention. You know, it's something that people hold on to. It has nothing to do with the core of the universe directly. On the other hand, from God comes that which becomes Judaism. And it has arranged that there are some people who live on the level of this level of observance, some people live on a higher level, some people live on a level where the attitude is guided by Judaism, some people are living by the attitude that's guided by the Torah, and then some people go and are in fresh connection with the divine. So it's a difference. There is a difference.
You admire some very Orthodox rabbis, some of your teachers. Many of them are gone. How would they judge the things that you're saying today?
Well, you know, I have a belief in the afterlife. And I have a certainty, not just a belief, about the afterlife. And along with that comes a sense that my teachers and masters are seeing the universe from a wider place than they saw it when they were in the body and in the flesh. One of the things I want to bring out really clearly about why am I hanging out with people like the Dalai Lama and let's say Father Matthew Fox and other people of that sort. I used to visit Thomas Merton in his monastery. The reason for that is that I have a sense that all religions, every religion, is a vital organ of the life of the planet. At one time, we used to think that when the Messiah will come, our religion will prove the others wrong. And that's called triumphalism. And I don't believe in triumphalism. And I don't believe that in the other world there is triumphalism either. So
But you're very much in the minority, I would say.
So Maimonides has said in matters of faith, you can be a majority of one.
And you're fine with that.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm not alone. I'm really not alone. I find that across the board, in whichever religion, we've talked before about that, I can find people with whom my heart and my understanding of cosmology, what is life all about and so on, that we share a great deal. At the same time, I think I must learn to be the best Jew that I can be, and my people with me, so that we can make the planet healthier. If, for instance, the liver is healthy, that'll help the heart also, and that'll help the kidneys and so on. So I think every religion has to achieve a level of health in order to heal the planet.
A lot of what you're saying is very attractive to some North American Jews who believe very much in the renewal that you're talking about. How relevant is what you're saying to the whole issue of Israel-Palestine?
You're touching something that gives me an ache in the heart. Before the '67 war, I tried to publish a piece, and in it I wrote that Jerusalem needs to be internationalized. The United Nations moved there, away from New York, into the place where the prophets have said, "My house shall be a house of prayer for all peoples," and that the then nascent Israeli army should be the beginning of the Peace Corps for the United Nations, and that we should all put together at the time when we paid 39 cents a gallon gasoline, a penny per gallon to help resettle the Palestinian refugees. It fell on deaf ears, you know. I still have some feelings about that. I have children in Israel, and whenever I go there, I want to meet with those people, and among the people who count themselves as my students, there have been those who have put on every year a sulha, a meeting between Arabs, Christians, and Muslims and Jews, to have the word sulha comes from when two Bedouin tribes would create peace among themselves and do mutual forgiveness. And each year the celebration has grown. So I'm very much for this to happen. If the question is about what is just and what is right, I think all the people who are trying to deal with that are taking for granted that the cortex can solve the problem. It's not a problem of the cortex, it's a problem of the reptilian brain of Jews and of Arabs and of Palestinians there. And it is also a problem of how this is being abused by people who want to stay in power by finding a whipping boy about that. We could have had the United States of the Middle East in such a wonderful way in which the talents and the resources of all of us could have helped each other. And El-Quds could have been a holy place for Jews, for Christians, for Muslims, in a way that Isaiah foresaw way before. So I have that vision, and I think that's a strong and important vision.
How likely is it that your vision will actually prevail?
It has no other choice. It has no other choice. When people look at every bit of karma that's coming down the pike, if they still think that one group is going to win over the thing, they're wrong. They're wrong. What they can't see yet is higher than national sovereignty into an organismic interaction. That's why I'm talking about United States of the Middle East. So look, a visionary isn't one that everybody agrees with. But if I don't put such a vision out, and if my colleagues don't put such a vision out, like the Rabbis for Human Justice and so on and so forth, if they didn't put that vision out, then it would never get there. And I would like to see my counterparts on the other side among Palestinians. And I know there are some, I've met some of them. I've spent some time recently with a Naqshbandi sheikh in Jerusalem, and it was wonderful.
I'm getting tape cut.